I was captivated by the story from page one and captivated all the way till the last page. I originally filmed this as part of a vlog, but I realized that I basically did a review of the Poppy War and I have enough here to constitute a standalone review. But I didn't have an introduction for that, so that's what I'm doing now. Also, I am talking about the first book in the Poppy War series, titled The Poppy War. I realize I have the Dragon Republic here. I don't have a physical copy of the Poppy War. I listened to the audiobook, so the Dragon Republic is just standing in, but I am talking about the first book. If you don't know anything about the Poppy War, it is a fantasy that is inspired by things that took place in China. As far as setting, technologically, building descriptions, clothing descriptions, it is based on 13th century China, but a lot of the events that happen in the book that the story takes a lot of inspiration from happen in 19th and 20th century China. While I was reading The Poppy War, I found a blog post by Read by Tiffany and a video here on YouTube by the Library of Alexandria that discuss the historical events that inspired the Poppy War. I had a great time reading this book, and I think that's pretty much all I need for an intro, so let's get into the review. It really feels like every line that is written in the Poppy War is absolutely necessary to the story, which does also make the story feel like it moves at a very fast pace, and it makes me feel like I just can't put the book down. We have an abrupt tone shift right around halfway through the book, and I also think that that was very intentional because our characters are thrust into war very abruptly, and I felt like the tone shift was also to thrust the reader into this war that's happening now in the story, and to thrust the reader into a different tone in the story immediately really pushes you to understand what these characters are also experiencing. The war is very violent, but it's not like violence on every single page continuously. The violence, for the most part, is contained to a single chapter that's about this battle and the aftermath of this battle, and it is absolutely terrifying and horrific to read about. But it's also told in a sensitive way, and it felt very organic to the story. I think part of this too is many of the atrocities that are described in the story. This is very much based on a battle that actually happened, and the atrocities that happened during and the aftermath of this battle are based on things, not even just based on things, like this is what actually happened in the real battle. And knowing that makes it all the more terrifying and horrible to read about. At the same time, I do feel like there was this level of sensitivity to the descriptions of the violence because it is something that actually happened, and it just, I don't know how to describe it, but it didn't feel gratuitous. It didn't feel like it was there for shock value. It felt like it was there because the story was necessary and needed to be told. I absolutely love the themes in this story. Just all of the themes. There's so much to explore in the story, and this is why I keep saying I need to reread the book, because I feel like there's so much more to explore than I even understood or grasped the first time through. And I'm excited to read more of the series because I'm excited to see where this is going. I love, even in the first part of the book, where Rin and Jian is exploring the spirituality and just who they are and how they're connected to this world and how they're connected to the gods. And that is a continued exploration that Rin goes on throughout the story. We also definitely have themes of war and what that means and what humans are capable of doing and what they're capable of doing to each other, especially whenever they see the enemy as no longer human, and what we do to justify our actions so that way we can live with ourselves, and just how we view other people, especially in times of war. It explores even the desire for revenge that you have whenever these atrocities are committed to what you consider your people, and you just want to go and do those same things again, even though you're horrified that it happened to innocents on your side. I felt like the ending was very satisfying while completely setting up another arc for book 2. We had a very satisfying conclusion to arc 1. We ended book 1 in a good place. We had a very satisfying conclusion to book 1's arc while still setting up the arc for book 2 and or the rest of the series. Rin is a really interesting protagonist because half the time I'm rooting for her and half the time she is making absolutely terrible decisions and doing terrible things. And she's a really interesting, very human character to explore. I do feel like every decision that she made was very in character for who she was, and we did get to see that character and explore that character throughout the book. But sometimes that means I'm frustrated with her. Sometimes she makes really bad impulsive decisions, but then she kind of comes down off that impulsive high and then regrets or reconsiders or has to deal with the decision that she just made, the actions that she just did. I love that part of the book. Right after the audiobook, there was an interview with R.F. Kuang, and I found that interview very interesting, and then I went and found more interviews that R.F. Kuang gave about the Poppy War. R.F. Kuang seems like an amazingly intelligent person, and I'm definitely interested in reading more of her books. The interview at the end of the audiobook of the Poppy War gave me a little bit of insight into some of the things that she was thinking whenever she wrote this story, and did make me view one of the scenes differently. So, without spoilers, one of our characters in this story, as a young girl, whenever she gets her first period, does decide to sterilize herself with the encouragement of the adults around her. And R.F. Kuang says she feels like the scene is often read as like a women's empowerment scene, but she actually wrote it with the thought process that this is more of a child abuse scene, because in what scenario would adults surrounding a very young girl encourage her to sterilize herself when she's really too young to be making that decision? In what scenario would that happen and it not be abusive? I don't think I initially read the scene as women's empowerment, but it did give me a different perspective of that scene, and I found that really interesting to think about, and to think about in the context of the entire story. And this is a story I'm going to think about and continue to think about over and over again. It is a story that I'm going to continue to explore. I'm definitely going to reread it. I'm going to read more of the history behind it, just everything. I hope you enjoyed going on this journey with me. If you want to see the links to the blog post read by Tiffany or the video by Library of Alexandria that explains more of the history, I will have them linked in my description. And please let me know if you've read the Poppy War and what your thoughts were. Oh my gosh, do you love it as much as I do, or am I completely wrong about this? Let me know in the comments. I hope you have a good day and happy reading.